Hello, I'm Wehbba. You're here in my studio in Barcelona, and I'm gonna take you through the process of Fake, my track released on Drumcode on the A-Sides compilation, released in August. So let's get started. This was one of those really fast tracks, you know, like you just get a groove on and you just feel like you need to finish it, and it was done quite fast. So usually my production process has two stages. I do the writing on Ableton, and then I do the post-production on Logic. So I started on Ableton, and it was done really fast, so all of the sounds, most of them, they didn't sound really that good. I had to fix it up quite a lot on Logic later. So we're just gonna start here with the kick drum, and I'm gonna just show a little bit of what's on it. And the kick drum. It was done with this machine here. Is the analog rhythm from Electron, and I recorded just like a 4-bar loop, and actually I recorded a huge take, tweaking the knobs, and I picked the best section out of the recording. After I recorded it, I just I have these little plugins here. They're amazing to emulate transformers from different types of gear. So this one is like is emulating the transformers on a Neve preamp, and I find that it gives a real. It makes everything sound more real, like less of a of digitized and stuff. So I just find it gives some nice kind of character to the sounds, and some good type of saturation, and. So I use that as the first insert on any channel that I record. They have a few different ones. For the kick drum specifically, I use the Neve because it gives it a real nice bottom end quality and tightens it up a little bit. So that was the first insert. And the second one was the API channel strip. Let's see what it's doing here. So I have the compressor on, and I turned the gain up a little bit, also to get a little bit more saturation and character from the channel strip. And that's pretty much it with the channel strip. No, I don't have any EQ on here. And so after that, I loaded an EQ, took some of the more aggressive mid-range on it. This EQ is really nice because it's really clean. It doesn't really affect any of the phasing or anything. It just pretty much does what it says it's doing, and it doesn't change any of the character of the sound so much. And then I have this filter, and it's just for the sections where I need to cut the low end of the kick drum, like here. So that I don't normally. Normally, if I'm writing the track, I just do it like live. I use the push for the sequencing, so I would just trigger it with a shortcut or here, whatever. It's faster at the time, and then I would just fine tune it. So you normally would see something like this, which is like a straight line from the me triggering it with the key, and then I would just fine tune it later on the production process, and I would just do sweeps and whatever it is. Without the inserts, that's how the kick drum would sound. It's not a huge difference, but this one really does make it sound warmer and tighter, and that's the main one. And of course, the compressor gives it a little extra crunch and punch from the API, and the EQ takes that mid-range out and gives it more space to add some other stuff on top. So this it sounds kind of a big by itself, and then this just has more room to fit other stuff, especially because I use so much elements in the low end area that it's kind of hard to fit them together. So one thing that I do is always like make room by EQing stuff out of the sounds, and yeah. So the second bit was this I called techno groove, which is a loop basically. I don't even know what that is completely. If I unloop it, just some loop. I took the first beat out of that loop, and that's kind of doing the job of a bass line in this track. So that one gets layered with the kick drum to make the basses of the track, pretty much. And so I've done a lot of processing on this one. The first one is this little... Actually, let me just bypass all of them so we can check what they're doing from the start. Okay, that one wasn't even on. So there's plenty of plugins there. The first one I used was... So that was the loop, basically. Then I added this little bad boy here called Voice of God. Amazing plugin name. So I used that to make the lows really stand out and really fat. And that one I use it pretty much all of my tracks. And it just gives... It can really control the way that it adds sub frequencies to any low end element, and it's just fat, you know. So I added that instead of the transformer as a first option, because I wanted to tighten it up later with the transformer plugin. So then it gives this kind of rough old techno sort of sound that I love. So that was the main character of that sound. Then I tried this compressor that didn't work, so I left it off. And here I have this 1176 emulation from Universal Audio. Really like this compressor. I actually have the hardware clone of it, and I use it to record actually a lot of the stuff I've put on this track. It goes first through the compressor, then here I process again with different compressors or whatever, because I find that the hardware one, it sounds more natural. Even if you can really push it, it just still sounds very unprocessed in a way, even though you can get like that really snappy attack and stuff out of it, but you can still add some stuff later, which I love. So this was the plugin emulation. It's doing some, just giving it that extra punch, which is what the 1176 is known for, basically. And after that, I have this filter, just cutting it where it should be cut on the arrangement to give it some room for the other hi-hats and stuff. Then the other filter, just the same as on the kick drum, to cut the low end on little breakdowns and stuff. So yeah, automation that wasn't used, all this stuff, it's still there because I'm not that organized. And EQ, this EQ I really love. It's just my go-to EQ for everything. It's just also great for cleaning up stuff, and it doesn't take any of the processing from the UAD DSP. And this is what it's doing. Taking that harsh edge of the hi-hat from the loop out, and also give another extra bump to the lows. And then I'm adding this stereo imager to actually cut all of the stereo out of it. And if you could see the other screen where I have the stereo stuff, you'll see that there's a lot of stereo stuff going on, but let me just put it down here. So this is what it's doing. Come here. You see there's a lot of stuff from the hi-hats on the stereo, but when I plug it on, you see it's basically just mono, because that's important since it's just a bass line, so I don't really need the stereo information here. And then the side chain to the kick so that it doesn't compete that much. Both together sound really rough, and then the side chain gives it room for the kick drum to shine. So that was the low end basically of the track. There's another analog percussion thing that I recorded. I don't even remember from which machine. It's like this long take of stuff. I've just chopped it up and used the one tiny bit that I wanted to add as a layer to the kick drum. And that one has just a filter on it, the DBX 160 to give the punch, and the stereo tool just to kind of narrow it out and make it less stereo as well, but still give it some place in the stereo tool. So that's the low end section. And okay, moving on to the drums then. Most of the drums on this track were done using this little boy here. Try to... This. I love this machine. It's a really old analog drum machine from this Roland company called Boss. And got it quite cheap on eBay, and it sounds amazing. It's like a mix between the 606 and the 808, and it just has really crisp hi-hats, a really nice snare drum, and I just love it. And that was actually the first track I made using this drum machine, so I used it quite a lot for a lot of the things. So the hi-hat, you can see here, so this is the open hi-hat from the machine. There's not a lot of control you can do with the elements, so you can actually, you need to record it in and then just chop it up and edit whatever the way that you like it. So yeah, I had to do some heavy editing on the sounds I recorded, and yeah, the automation, it's kind of just chopping it up so that it doesn't sound so long. Like this is the actual recording. So that was the ride cymbal from the machine, or the open hi-hat, I don't remember. But then I just did the automation. It's just level automation so that it sounds shorter and tighter, and then I could use that as an off-beat hi-hat. Then I add all those plugins here on the... By the way, these plugins, I don't really insert them right away. I just kind of go and get the loop going. I roll the flow first, and then I just start adding stuff that will make everything kind of fit together. So this is the transformer plugin, but the different one from it's modeling an API transformer. So let me just turn them all off, and you can see what they're doing. So again, just adding some saturation and some slight kind of crunchy punch to the sound. This one, again, the channel strip, I don't think it's doing much in this case. Maybe I try to EQ it. Yeah, I tried to EQ it, it didn't work. I just left it on because I like the character from the preamp stage. And then the EQ, taking some resonance out of the high frequencies, because this is a real analog machine with a lot of resonant sounds, and they sound amazing by themselves, but once you start putting them together in the mix, it kind of needs some removing, so that's what it's there for. And then this reverb plugin I really like, the Ocean Way, just to give it some space. And normally I would have that set as a sand, but I was lazy here, and I didn't want to use a lot of reverb on the track, so I picked the elements that I needed to have them on, and I just used them there. So that was the hi-hat, and then there's some level automation going on. Okay, so on to the next hi-hat. It's these ones were recorded from the Roland TR-8 through the compressor there, the UA76. What I like to do with the TR-8, because it's so nice with the faders and the knobs, you can perform with it quite a lot, so I like to just jam with it for a while and record everything I have. And then later I'll just pick up some of the bits that I like more, and I use them on the track. I line up a sort of different types of sections I like on this other screen here, on the mixer, and I just try different clips when I'm jamming and see the ones I prefer. So this was the first one. This is the raw recording. So it's pretty much those two. All the way through the track, I just going switching between them. And I have this pan man loaded up, which is just panning the sound. So each hit plays in one of the speakers as separate as I want them to be, with the width button. I use this quite a lot for hi-hats because it gives some space for other stuff in the middle. And it's sometimes not that easy to just pan them like to either side, so I just like to keep them going like that. It gives a nice balance to the track. And again, the channel strip from API, I love this thing. That's just pretty much hitting the yellow, just a little bit of saturation, not that much, and cutting the low end out of it. And that would be, by the way, the 909 instrument on the TR-8. You know, it's techno, so you need a 909. And again, now the clap, next channel. The clap is also coming from that little drum machine, the DR110. And it sounds like this. That machine doesn't really have MIDI, so you need to either sequence it on the machine and then record it as the tempo is kind of random. You don't have like a tempo display or anything, so you don't really know which tempo it is. You can approximate it by hand, but it's very difficult because the button is not really precise. So I normally like to play, especially like claps and snares, I play them with my hand because it has these nice little buttons on it that feel really nice. So I like to play them by hand, record them in, and then I just warp it. And so that's how it was done for the clap. That's what you see here, these little weird warp marks. And that's the sound from it. And what I wanted to do in this track is like an old school trick, is to use a kind of either a reversed reverb or elongated reverb for the clap. And that's what this reverb from Eventide here is doing. Is I actually used a long pre-delay, and it's just kind of doubling up the clap. And I think that's just a really nice groove when, you know, with the kick. So that was the idea of the reverb here, and it's not a lot of things, just the reverb, no delay, no compressor, nothing. After that, then the transformer again, you see it in every channel basically. Then some EQing. So you see how the transformer here brings both the transient and the reverb up front, and the EQing here to bring more highs into the sound, and another EQ to cut them, but just like this super high frequencies. And then if you remove both EQs, you see that it makes a difference by boosting and cutting at the same time. This gives it more direction to that sound. And then I have a sand here enabled that will just give it, you know, send it to a reverb. It gives that kind of a whip. And that saves me a lot of time on doing effects later. I'll just do that with the sand. But we get to that later on. So this one is a ride cymbal, the ride cymbal, also from the DR110. That's actually the cymbal. That wasn't played by hand, it was sequenced on the machine and then warped. Again, the reverb, I used it on the channel, not on the send. It's pretty much the same settings, if I'm not mistaken, from the other. Where is it? Oh, I missed one hi-hat. We're gonna go back to it. But yeah, it's the same settings from the other one, just copied it over. Also out of laziness. And if I have the processing power, sometimes it just works. Okay, still on the right then. Then I have a sidechain. Then this stereo Widener, which is the micro shift. It's like a chorus that would just make it all stereo and nice. And then for a change, I use the SSL channel strip, which is cutting the highs basically, not a lot else going on here. And that's about it for that ride channel. And then going back to a hi-hat that I missed before. It's a sample hat. So it was a hi-hat that I sampled from a track. So as you can see, it's just the hi-hat bit. So the automation is cutting out everything else. It's pretty much a 909 hi-hat. I don't know why I sampled this exactly, if I could have just done it with a TR-8, but like I said, this track was done really fast, and if I needed to just get something done quickly, that's what it was happening. I guess I was just listening to something and I liked the sound of the hi-hat. I chopped it and I used it. But I normally don't do it. I don't like to do it, and I still kind of processed it a lot. I EQ'd it with this with the EQ, and then I use the side chain, but it's not even doing much, it's just doing the level automation. So that was the sampled hi-hat. Not proud of it, but there you go. Okay, so moving on to the instruments. We have the first one here is the Virus. It was my first synth, and still one of my favorites. And it's just great to make these ravey sounds, and this is a real ravey sound. So it was a bit of a tricky element because I was tweaking the synth, and I got the sound out of it and I loved it, but it has this weird phase setting that I don't really understand how it even gets that wide, but this is how it sounds on its own. And if I would show you here, like this is really, it's like completely negative. So when you turn on the, you put it on a stereo setting, for example, on a mono system or whatever it is, it's really not compatible at all. So if I would just put like, to show you quickly. But it sounds completely different. So I had to, after the track was done, I was like, okay, I had a friend that I always kind of bounce ideas off of him, and I sent the track. He's like, dude, this is not mono compatible at all. And I was like, okay. So I had to waste some time tweaking this to make it compatible somehow. So I came up with these little plugins here, the stereo again, the EQ, and the Ableton utility. And then I just picked one of the channels. I took the right channel and I made it mono, and then I widened it with this plugin alliance thing called BX Stereo Maker, and it made it wide again, and that's a lot closer to what it was originally, but without the phasing issues. So then I took out some of the mid-range to make room for other stuff, and yeah, that was off to begin with. It was just to try out the stereo. After I've used this Moog filter, I love this filter. I used it on anything that needs some filtering, like a low pass filter, and that's what it's doing basically. So yeah, that's just a low pass on the sections that it needs to be done. Then I have another EQ cutting the lows out of that sound. This one, again, I've used it because it doesn't color the sound so much. Just really just cleans it up and doesn't color it at all. And so side chains, I have one that's going to a sound that I'm gonna show later, and the other one, well, this is just a high pass, and then I have another side chain to the kick. Not super strong because I don't like the side chaining effect too much, but it is necessary sometimes just to make room for stuff to be on top of it, and that's what it's really doing. And another EQ, I don't even know why, but let's see. Yeah, also cutting some more of the mid-range, and then the tape machine. Just because I like tape, and it sounds nice on that one. And yeah, that's about all the elements we have for this. And that's the main thing of the track, is when everything is really alive in the arrangement. Next to that is the little stab. it goes almost throughout the track. So it was basically just the Prophet 6, and I've done all the automation with my hand when I record. The same with all my hardware. I don't like to really do much automation on the screen. I just do a sequence I like, and I record a big take with the synths, and I just tweaking knobs and stuff. And if I by the end of it, if I lose the preset, it's gone, and I have to remake them, which I started to enjoy after a while working like this. So this was also brand new when I did this track. I just had it for like a month or so. One of the first tracks I've used it on. Such an amazing synth, and super juicy. So this is one of the main elements of the track as well. You can hear it more. And that is side chaining that little ravey thing, huge ravey thing I have going on. So it gets cut when this tab comes in to give it more room to shine. And on the stab channel, I have a compressor. The compressor is the LA2A emulation, smooth sort of compressor that it's kind of meant to be transparent just to control the dynamics of it. So let me turn it off. It has a lot of low end, that sound. So I use the compressor to tame those and make the kind of a noisy bit sound close to it. Then here I've added low cut with that same EQ that colors nothing. And then I've added a transformer to tame everything. And then after working on it for a while, I thought it needed some limiting. So that's the L2 there, doing the heavy duty limiting on that sound. Okay, next stop is this little sounds here. It's just some quick, I'm gonna actually turn everything off here. Just 3 inserts on it, and it's just this little I don't really remember where I made this sound. It was kind of a random sequence. It's probably from the Prophet as well, because I was abusing the Prophet and the DR110 on this project, so it sounds like it's from the Prophet. Anyways, I've recorded this random sequence from it, and I chopped up some of the bits that I liked and used them in a few sections here, like the small fills. It's pretty much just those ones. And on the first breakdown before the drop, I've used this. This is kind of a hook there, but it kind of sounds a bit plain as they are right now. Then I beefed them up with a lot of saturation, basically. So one is the transformer plugin. Already sounds a lot more expressive. And then I added this free reverb from Yuhi. I still use this quite a lot. There's not a lot of settings. You just randomly generate patches and send them the ones you like. so that they can code the plugin when it comes out. I don't even know if they're still doing this project, but I still use the plugin a lot. It sounds really nice. And so that was the sound with the reverb, with, without. And then actually this is a part where it's not, it cuts down quickly. So I've automated the wet of the reverb in some parts so that it gets cut out quickly. And after that, it comes the main component of this sound, which is the distortion from the Culture Vulture. I really, really abuse this thing in every track I do. My favorite distortion unit. And I've never really tried the hardware. People say it's very similar, the sound you get from it. So I just really love the plugin, so I use it in pretty much everything. So then it makes it really shine. It's definitely one of the most recognizable elements of the track, I think. And yeah, it's due to this bad boy here, the Culture Vulture. Love that. So I have also this delays that are coming. Sometimes you hear it, it's not there on the inserts. So it's all on the send, and I'm still gonna go through the sends later on the video. I have 3 sends set up, 2 reverbs and 1 delay. So I have a few elements that are going to the sends, and we're just gonna go through them later. Because you know, when we're going through the sounds, you can still hear them, but I like to use sends. I don't normally use the sends like in a way they are meant to be used. If they're meant to be used anyway, it's just like I have them set up to be more like effects instead of using actual effects on a specific channel. I'll just send stuff through the sends and have them do the heavy lifting there. And so we're gonna go through those later in the video. And here I have next channel is a rim shot. I really, really love rim shots, and I use them extensively in my production. And so this one has a lot of plugins. Let me turn them all off. Again, this was from the TR-8, and big jam here, recorded. I chopped up the bits I like. Picked different loops out of them. This is the great thing about Ableton. You can just go through them quickly and choose the ones you like without having to lay them out on the arrangement screen and just go through them changing positions. It's just a lot quicker to get those. So this is one of the sections that I used. This is the other one. I only think that yeah, I just use those 2 ones, alternating through them. Oh yeah, in the breakdown I use that one too. So 3 sections I've recorded from this whole like jam. I do like there's a roll function here on the TR-8. I use that a lot when I'm jamming with it, and then I just get like different sorts of rolls happening that I wouldn't normally think about when I was just sequencing them. So that's the performance. Then first plugin is the transformer thing. So saturation and for the transient to kind of poke through more. It's all snappier with this. And then the reverb again. Same setting, just copied it over. So that it sounds like it was recorded in the Ocean Way rooms. Expensive stuff. And it's just a lovely plugin. And then some EQ. Taming that really harsh, really strong mid-range. Again, the filter plays a big part on this sound because I've automated a lot the cutoff. And through a lot of the track, that's how it sounds. It's just there to kind of fill up this area of the low mids. And it's more like a percussion sound rather than like a rim shot, which is a percussion sound, but it's more like a high mid thing. Yeah, then it just goes up and down and round and round. That's the Moog filter again, doing the filtering duties. This plugin I've used next is a Valhalla frequency echo. This is a free plugin as well from Valhalla DSP. I love this company. They do really good stuff. So I'm automating the mix. It sounds like an ensemble of people playing rim shots, you know, like a... And he goes crazy with the shift, with the frequency shifting. I just love that thing. So I'm automating the feedback and the mix here. And the frequency shifter is actually going backwards, so it's like the frequencies are going down. So it's not the same signal that is just looping with a delay. It just is kind of spaced out, kind of tape echo thing. Next one is the compressor. It's just kind of kissing the needle here. It's not really compressing a whole lot. It just gives, because this compressor is so expressive, if it just kind of touches the compression, it's already kind of doing this transient thing quite heavily. And then to tame it, I would add a limiter. And that's how the sound is. And then later on, just have a high pass. Because the low end is so messy in this thing. Yeah, I needed to cut it out. And it's nicer to do sometimes with the filter because it sounds a bit more aggressive than doing it with in a cue. I like the Ableton's filter a lot. It just you can make it sound the way you want it, and it's quick and easy. And you can use it here on the little screen that I have here. So I just like it. Moving on to the next channel. There's another main element of the track is the vocals, and that's a bit tricky. It's I have 4 vocals here that were chopped up with Ableton's Simpler, and I don't even remember what it was originally, but then this is how it sounds. So let's break it down to the individual ones. I have a lot of plugins loaded up on the group, so we will disable them all. And I decided to group the vocals because I wanted to do this phaser thing going. All of them by themselves. They sound way too different. So that was just like a small chop from one of them. And then there's another one here. This is just for the transient of the from this. I didn't originally have the transient thing going on, but I added it because it makes sense with the phaser. It makes it sound a lot nicer, and we're gonna see that later. I'm just gonna reload the project so that I can go back to the original settings once we turn on the individual plugins on the vocal chain. So normally, yeah, I had the idea for the vocal. I had no idea what I was going for, but I had it in my head, and I was just like going through bits that would make it sound close to what I had in my head. And that's kind of tricky to do in a fast and streamlined way. And I got really lucky this time with these ones. I was just going through them. I was like, okay, it sounds like fake, and I was like, okay, it works. And later on, the tricky part was just adding the plugins to make them sound like it was in my head. And I think I got really close with these bits. So let's go one by one. There's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so the first thing was the transformer, as usual. Then I added that free reverb again. Automating the wet. And then the feedback here, this other. Again, stuff's going to the sends, either to the reverb or to the delay. And I have, again, after this reverb, I have a limiter, like really limiting stuff. So it's I'm adding 22 dBs of gain. That's a massive amount. Because I wanted to get that little chops to sound almost as loud as the bass thing, and but I wanted to do it with a limiter because it sounds a lot more aggressive. And then I compressed it on top of the limiter with the Fatso to kind of tame down the high frequencies on it, because Fatso is great for that. It gives this kind of tape saturation and high frequency taming that I really like. And the compression mode here is, it kind of emulates 1176. Again, my favorite compressor. So that's the Fatso, saturation and compression again. And then I'm doing the stereo. For the yeah, just to give it a lot of width and make it stand out in the mix. Then this filter here is cutting. It cuts that resonant sound of the high-end frequencies. And I find it sounds like an old sampler once you do that. It just sounds like a bit like old school. If I move that, if I move it like this, it almost sounds like a phaser. And I just like that kind of character it gives when you do that cut with the filter. It's like almost like an infinite cut, and I just like that a lot. Then I've loaded up this SSL channel strip that's doing some EQing, adding some mids, adding some highs, cutting some highs, and cutting the lows. So I like to do this a lot with the high frequencies. I add a lot of top end with some something, and then I just cut it with a filter after, because it gives more control to whatever it is that I've added. And so that's, it makes it sit the whole thing more in the mid-range rather than the high frequencies. And yeah, it just sounds better. This is a chorus plugin. And that gives the actual character of the whole sound, I find. And I use this chorus plugin quite a lot in most of the tracks I use. They have a new one now, but this one, it just, you know, the new one just looks better because it's bigger. And it's the same sound. It's a Roland Dimension D emulation, and it's a very versatile chorus, even though it has only like 4 settings, or 5 if you press, you know, if you press the combination of the buttons. And it's just gels stuff together in a really nice way. And on top of that, I've added a phaser. I never do this much processing on vocals, but you know, I was trying to do it fast, you know, have it match what I had in my head, kind of in fastest way possible. So I just kept adding stuff and adding stuff. Most of the time, it makes it sound a lot worse, and then I end up deleting a lot of the processing. But in this case, it just really worked for what I was trying to get at. And the phase thing is just more like for the movements. It's very, oops, okay, phone stays here. So it's more like, it's very slow, the rate. So if I keep it on the wide like this, you can really hear that it's, so it's just to give it a little bit more movement, and very like mild setting. And often this is what works best with phasing stuff. It's like just to give some movement without adding so much character to a sound. I just really like that. And the Phase Mistress is an amazing phaser plugin. It doesn't even sound like a plugin at all. And then later there's just sidechain to stuff that are important and interesting, you know, like, so the synth that it's like a little hook here, that needs to shine more than the vocal in that area, so I just sidechained it. Just basically out of laziness. I could also automate the levels, but you know, sometimes the sidechain is faster and easier. It just works. It's just the same. And then I've added the filter in the end, just cutting the highs, and that's all it's doing. And in the end, that was not even on. It was just to check the mono compatibility. It was pretty compatible, so you know, I didn't even use that one. And that's the vocal. Okay, now one of my favorite things, because it comes from one of my favorite bits of kit. It's a really fat noise build-up kind of sound. So these are all different takes I've recorded, also like doing stuff with my hand. So it comes from this big boy here. Is the Super Jupiter from Roland. It's like a Jupiter 6 or 8 in a box. So yeah, it's really fat and juicy, as you can hear. So I've recorded this. Then I've, again, the transformer plugin. For saturation and tightness. Then I've used this EQ from Waves. I really like this EQ to do mid-side or left-right EQing. I like it because it's quick to achieve that, and it sounds nice as well. Like it has a kind of character that I like. You can change the character, like, you know, from API EQs to SSL to whatever it is. I like the API settings here. So I'm EQing both channels differently because this is a mono synth. I can do stereo, like if you do like different patches to each side, but in this case I recorded it as mono. And so that's, each side has a different EQ setting, different low cuts, different mid-range settings, and it opens up the stereo width when you do that with stuff. So since this is an effect that's made to be like a build-up, I want it to be pretty wide, but I didn't want to lose the focus of the sound, the character, the main character, so I didn't want to use the stereo maker, because it kind of changes the character quite a lot. Then I have a sidechain to the kick. A bit more than I would add to a normal like instrument. It has like a more aggressive sidechain on this. Then again the stereo, because apparently it wasn't wide enough, so I just used it on top of it. But I kept the mono frequencies pretty much mono, like all the way through to 250 hertz. So it's just widening the high end of that sound a little bit more. That's probably added a lot later on the production stage. Then the auto pan, so it moves a little bit, and just very a little bit. This is like all the way through. I just wanted it to move a little bit through the sides, again for movement. And this is just a correction EQ, because there's a really aggressive mid-range. I just took out all of that resonance to make it sound less aggressive on the whole sound. And here, when I wanted it more aggressive on the other breakdown, I just let it through a little bit more. Okay, So that was the build up with the Jupiter 8. Super Jupiter. This next channel here, it goes all the way through the track as well, almost. It's a little loop I've done with the CS80 plugin from Arturia. It's just I recorded the loop and I let it go for a while. I bounced it to audio because I thought that maybe I was gonna chop that up, but in the end I decided to be lazy again, and I've used a plugin I'm gonna show you later. So this is the raw sound. It has that little build up with a pitch from one of the oscillators, so I cut that out and I just left the stuff when it's steady. And once that is looped, I added the transformer. Sidechain to the kick, very heavily. And the tremolator is doing the chopping that I was supposed to do by hand. It's almost like a sidechain again. Okay, that's smudged through the sand with the reverb. So in the end, it's tighter with the tremolator, and then sidechain doing this, and then we have a filter because I don't want it to open all the way to the track. It's a lot of high frequencies in there, so it's only to the more dramatic bits of the track where it's leading to something else. So that was the little arpeggio thing. And then we have the final track here is a two effect. Actually, one is a reversed reverb. That's a reversed reverb from that main the sound that I distorted, which is this. So I just sent it to a big reverb, probably one of the sends. I think it was a yes. So I have one of the sends set up like this, and I've sent that sound to this reverb, recorded it, and reversed it. I think if I unreverse the sound, you can. That's how it sounded before. Yeah. So that's the sound originally, and then I reversed it. I do this quite a lot with stuff. I record, send to a reverb and reverse it later and use it as an effect at some parts of the track. Pretty old trick, but it works, and when it's not that obvious, it always kind of fits in nicely without being cheesy. So that's used, I guess, twice on the track before the two drops we have. Hate that expression, by the way. And this is, okay, again, the Jupiter. Doing a noisy kind of thing. I don't like just to use plain noise. So there's quite a lot of things going in there. Is the oscillators do heavily LFO'd on the pitch, and the filter. You can hear the kind of fast tremolo happening. So that's coming from the LFO into the oscillators. And then I have the noise. One of the oscillators is set up to noise, and the other one was set up to either a sine wave or a square with a high rate of the LFO. And then, yeah. Sounds kind of like a laser gun from the future in the 70s or something. And I added the filters. to make the sound more like a noise, but without being just plain noise. And then I added this crazy funky H3000 plugin from Eventide. Just doing this modulation on the stereo and on filters as well. I just love this plugin. It's really great for spaced out stuff, and you can. It's very hard to tweak, as you can see here from all those little cables, and you know the settings are pretty extensive. But you know, with the actual box, the original ones, people would just use presets because it was also kind of hard to program. That's kind of how I used it. Just loaded a preset, and that's it. And it just sounded good. So that's the effects that I have. I only have those two set up for the track, not much. Just doing the this kind of working like a crash. And that's it for the last track of the project. And then I have the sends here. A lot of the tracks are going to the sends, so I'll just show what they are. One of them is Reverb. I like this Reverb from Waves for effects. It's just like not natural sounding at all. It sounds, I don't even know what it sounds like. You can make it sound very different, but let's just add like the clap as an example. And so that's the clap through the reverb. And it just sounds big, and it has this kind of a crash effect as well. And on top of that, I add the transformer as if I was recording it through a big desk, which I'm not, but you know, makes it sound good. Then the pull tech to add some highs to the reverb, because it's not that much, but it's doing something. And again, as I do with most high boosts, I cut it after that so that it gives more direction. So that's about that one send. And we have a different send here below is the delay. Echo Boy, love that delay, my favorite one, I think. And that's just doing a tape echo, but with a pretty clean setting. And let's see what was going there. Okay, let's try it again with the clap. So. So that's just a delay. I'm using here a ping pong setting, so it, you know, each hit goes to each side of the thing. And I've used it in a few channels. I use it on a clap. I've used it on what else? On that synth, we heard it before. And yeah, it's just nice to give some continuity to some of the elements. And again, the last one is a reverb here. This is not really used in any channels, just on that first loop thing that I used. I wanted to add a reverb to the hi-hat of it, because I didn't want a lot of reverb in any of the hi-hats. So and this one, because it's not all over the track, I just felt that it needed some more width. So I cut all of the lows from that loop before sending to the reverb, because this makes it feel like it's in the toilet or something. I just wanted the hi-hat to be on the toilet, and I cut that all out, and I added a plate from UAD, which I also really love. So those are the sends. And then on the master channel here, I have a load of plugins, a lot of them. And those get added after I'm done with the track, and I know that it sounds like when it sounds really bad, so I'll just disable all of them, and we'll go through each one separately, and you can hear how the track sounds without my bus processing. I like to process the master bus on Ableton Live, because normally I don't bounce all of the tracks and do Logic right away. I'll just try the track out first, and then so I just try to make it sound as good as possible within Ableton once I'm done with it. And I'm pretty sure later I'm gonna change a lot. So that's just to get the main idea done and try it out on the weekend, and see how it sounds and see what needs to be done. And once I'm actually done with the track, then I'll just export all of it and load those same plugins on the Mixbus in Logic with the same settings. I'll just save each of the settings and start from there, and then I'll just tweak him in Logic. So first I've added a Fatsu, which is not doing much, I have to say. Normally it does a lot, but it's not doing much here. It has this low end kind of it fattens up the low end a little bit. That's what it does. Then I have the EQ, that really clean one, from Massenburg. I don't even know how to say that. Massenburg EQ. I really love that EQ. It's just really clean. Then I have the Vitalizer to add some stereo width and some low end as well. I like the way that it kind of gives it a round quality to the low end, and it makes the highs also very, very crisp and not that harsh. I've been using this for I don't even remember how long. This other EQ is just to really boost the top end of things. As you can see, there's a big dip here. You can't barely hear it. It's just to give it some air, and I do that often as well with the high end. Because during the production process, you normally tend to kind of cut a lot of the highs because you get annoyed when you're working long hours, and so in the end, you kind of need to boost them all up again. So that's what I've done with that EQ. And here I just have a limiter. I like to work with 2 or more limiters when I'm limiting stuff, because I don't like to do all the heavy lifting with one plugin alone. So this one is boosting like around 14 dBs because I've pretty much done a really bad gain staging during the track. Again, not common procedure here, but as I was trying to be really fast, I didn't really pay attention to the gain staging before I hit the master bus. So I could have done better, but that's what it happened. So then I've added an L2 here. Nowadays I'm not using the L2 as much on the Mixbus. I use the BX limiter, but I like the L2 just the same. I've used it for many years. And that's about it. That's what I've done within Ableton. That's just a meter. And yeah, so once I was done with this and I played it out and I said, okay, I'm happy with it, I'm not happy with it. Then I exported all of the stems and I load them into Logic. So, okay. Next stage in the production of Fake was the Logic project. So I've done the mix down here, that was the final mixdown that got delivered to Drumcode recently. And I've gone through like a few mixdowns of this track because, like I said, since I've made it so fast, I didn't really pay attention to a lot of the sounds I was making, and it was really tricky to get it right. And like playing them out, it sounded really bad. Then I got to a demo that I was kind of happy with it, but not entirely. So then I moved everything over to Logic, and I tried to make it sound decent. So you see here on the mixer screen, there's a lot of inserts in all of the channels. Normally my templates, they have one of these, which are the NLS plugin from Waves. It emulates a channel strip from either a Neve, an SSL, oh, buggy, yeah? Never happened before. Okay, so yeah, either an SSL, Chandler mixer, or is it Chandler? I guess so. And this is a Neve. So I use the Neve for most of my projects, and that's just on each of the inserts to emulate that each of those channels were run through one of the channels of a Neve console. It doesn't do much to the sound. It's more about the phasing and the interaction, crosstalk between channels, these kind of things. So that's what it's doing. And then, okay, so I have all of the channels. They're going to groups. The kick drum is going to, I have like one group called lows, which is just the kick drum, that loop that was doing the bass line. And then the other percussion sound that was doing the double kick kind of thing. So those are going to the lows group. And I have processed the kick drum further here with more EQing on the Neve channel strip, and then more EQing on the equilibrium, and then I guess it's not EQing. No, it's not EQing here with this, but it's just making it mono all the way through the 22 kilohertz. So it's just making it mono, because for some reason the kick drum wasn't mono before. There's like I guess from the tick of the kick, it wasn't mono. I guess I recorded it in stereo and processed it, so it happened. But yeah, so I made it mono, EQ'd it further, and then sent it to the group. Same thing here. Then with the bass, because that, after playing them out, the tracks out, you really realize what's wrong with the kick and bass, and that's, in techno, that needs to be done right. I would say most dance music, kick and bass is important. So after playing it out a few times, I realized what was wrong with it. So I've EQ'd it more with a Neve channel strip. Amazing little free plugin called Subfilter from Brainworks on Plugin Alliance. That's just giving, even after I've put the voice of God and I've done a lot to the sound, I've still found that it needed more tightness on the low end. So this is actually, it's still kind of all over the place. Once you load this on, it adds a lot of subs, but it cuts everything out below the 49 here. So if I'm just gonna bring back the, you get like that little mud here, but once you cut it, it just really drops, and it just really boosts one frequency around 50 hertz, and that's what I needed the most here. Then I've added a sidechain to the kick, even more than it was before. Made it mono with here. And added a tremolator, which is even accentuating that sidechain kind of thing. I could have made it more like audible with the threshold here on the compressor, but it just has a different quality to it. And with a tremolator as well, you can actually make the depth. You can keep it all the way through the track without actually depending on the kick, and you can automate the depth as you wish. I wanted to have that flexibility, but in the end I didn't use it. I just kept it all the way through. So that was the extra processing on that channel. And then they are all going through the group where I have a tape. So I have a tape, stutter tape in each of my groups. I cannot afford to have them on each of the channels, which are, you know, that's actually the main purpose of a stutter machine. You record each of the tracks from a desk into each of the channels of a stutter. But my DSP doesn't handle it, so I just keep them on the bus groups, and that works for me. I like that character. So I have the stutter. It gives this kind of glue to the sounds on the low end, and I like the kind of saturation and compression that happens with tape sounds, and this one really nails the character of a tape machine. Later, I have the API channel strip again, not EQing, not compressing, just using the preamp stage. That's also in all of my mixdown templates. I add the channel strip because it, you know, it's so fancy having like a Neve desk with the API character as well, you know, and so you can get like the Neve headroom and the API punchiness and saturation. So it's like, you know, it's a nice way to add different flavors to the mix without having to do much. You just load them up and you get those flavors, and I just really like that. I like being able to have this kind of mutant mixing desks at my disposal. And yeah, this is my favorite compressor on besides the 1176. It's the Fatso. So for the lows, just brings them together, tighten it up, gives a lot of direction to that sound, and just, you know, it's an amazing compressor for low end stuff. I used it in every track as well. Tried out this, didn't work. It's just saturation, and then the EQ to just cut that little bit extra of the real low end. Some more of that annoying low mid area around the 400 hertz. That's kind of something I've always kind of cut in the lows, because that's also an area where you use a lot of percussion elements, and it sounds messy with the kick and bass. So I just tend to cut it a lot. Next channel here is the hi-hat. I've just pretty much EQ'd it. I didn't. Okay. So that hi-hat and all the other drums, they're going to the drum channel. I have a drums bus here. So let's see how that sounds. Here, how that sounds. So it's just pretty much the hi-hats and the clap. Those are not a lot processed. I've limited the hi-hat, that sample hi-hat I had. I've added this extra limiting for like 2 dBs just to give it more control. When it hit the compressor on the bus, it was kind of swallowing everything else, so I just felt it needed to limit a little bit. the transient in there. So that's all there is to it. And then the clap, EQ'd it a little bit with a linear EQ so it wouldn't change the character too much. Added another layer of saturation with the transformer. Let's go to the clap. So that's the clap without and with. Again, the reverb we hear is that one that I used before with the pre-delay so that it sounds like bouncing back like this. So that's the clap that's going now with all the other drums. We don't have extra processing and anything else. So the drums now are, again, the tape is the first insert. Tape is doing the kind of gel. It's very subtle, but you know, you realize it sounds a lot more cohesive when you are running through the tape thing. And then the API goes standard into every bus channel I have. So it's not doing anything, it's just to get that character from it. And then I'm using the limiter. And then because that hi-hat was poking through still so much, and all of the drums, they sound pretty punchy here. So I just still needed an extra layer of limiting. Just made it all sound a bit louder and then more controlled with the transients, running it through the limiter. Then after, you know, once everything is done and balanced, you always kind of end up doing the extra EQing just to make it, you know, that little extra polish. So that's the little extra push I gave here on the high end. Just gave more definition on the highs. And that's about it for the drums. And then I have the mids channel. That's also kind of, I'm not doing much with the instruments anymore here. Any of the other channels that I didn't process anything else extra, apart from a limiter on the voices, but that's about it. And so the mid, I have normally like two mid-range channels on the mix buses. So one of the channels are, I try to group the stuff that makes sense together so that I can balance them on the each channel separately. So this one was just the rave sound and then the prophet sound and then that fill from the prophet as well with a distortion. So those are running into the tape, then nothing processing here on the API channel strip, just getting the preamp sound, and then the limiter, because I just wanted to make everything not compress. This sound was so loud compared to the other stuff, and it has so much character and transients that it was kind of compressing the whole track when it was running into the mix bus. So I wanted to make it loud, but still not have it compress everything else. So that's the way I've done it. I just used the limiter on top of it all. And the second mid-range channel has the rim shots. Those normally go into the drums, but because I've used so much effects on them, they didn't really sound like a drum or percussion bit anymore, so I just decided to put them on the mid-range channel. And then I have the voices. And then I have also the little arpeggio from the CS80. And there's nothing happening here. That's just the tape and the API, but not compressing, not doing anything special, just to get the characters of those two. And then I have the effects channel, same thing. Those effects we've talked about before. The sends and those two. So those are the sends, and then I have the reverse reverb and that noise sound from the Jupiter. So that's the group from the effects. And then lastly, I have the Mixbus. So this is an important part of my my sound, because I get a lot of the transient sorted with the Shadow Hills compressor. Before it used to be the Fairchild from UAD, now it's the Shadow Hills, and it plays a big part on how the stuff sounds together in my music. So this is the way it sounds without it, and this is how it sounds with it. So the settings I use is like, whatever suits the track best, but I always get the same kind of sound out of this thing, and it's just really important to the texture. A lot of people, like mastering engineers, ask you not to send anything compressed, but it's just an integral part of my sound, so I send it like that. I try not to squash it with any limiters before I send it in, but the compression on the Mixbus is it's an important part of how my music sounds, so that's always in there. Then I EQ'd it a little bit with a massive passive. Always kind of in all my tracks I use it. So this is without. This is with. Just magic. This EQ sounds amazing in anything you run through it. So yeah, that was the EQ. Then some extra details on EQing with a Massenburg and with and without. Some more details on the highs. Again, getting some more air here and some details on the mid-range. Very subtle, but necessary. Again here with a different EQ, because that one's super clean, this one is not so clean. I'm boosting that same area I did. This is the same setting I had on Ableton, because I start with that same, those same settings, and then I just add more stuff or remove some stuff. So you can see I don't have the vitalizer here anymore. Probably something else I removed. So I start with those settings, and then I just change on Logic to suit the final mix down. So here I have also the Fatso on the whole mix. So it's just really catching that hi-hat and taming it finally after many limiting plugins trying to. The Fatso grabbed them the most. So I like the dynamics that having more than one compressor on the Mixbus gives you, because you make things interact in a different, more dynamic way, and it's just more interesting to my ears the way stuff sounds. Separation is nice, but the dynamics, the interactions between the elements through the compressors are also really nice. So I like to play with different sorts of compressors on the Mixbus, as well as on the on the individual buses. And then finally, I have the tape machine that's set up to a very transparent setting. I don't like to use more saturation or more character in the last stage, because I've pretty much covered it all with the other channels. So I just like to run it through this thing to get that last bit of tape glue, if I can say that. And the last channel here, the Mixbus, I like to run the Apex Ampex tape. Because that's on the one of the, just get that last kind of glue from tape without affecting the character of the sound. And I also like to do the level. Once you hit, just kind of kiss the red here, and go back down on the output. So I'll just show you here. So the input is just pretty much kissing the red. Output the same. Once you get that, you get about like 3 dBs of headroom, 3 to 6, which is more than enough for to have a decent mastering happening. So that's the final stage of the whole mix, and that's where I finished it and sent it off to mastering. And I think that's about it for the whole track. Okay, so that was it. That was Fake, released on Drumcode, the A-Sides compilation in August. And thanks for joining me. I hope you guys liked to hear about it. And if you want to check more stuff, more of my releases, more tour dates and stuff like that, just check my Facebook page, facebook.com/Wehbba, and also my SoundCloud. You guys, get all the links there. That's it. See you around.